I feel that for the very first time in history, we not only understand the genetic underpinnings of disease, but we actually have tools that allow us to tackle them.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Pathfinders, the podcast series from RBC Capital Markets that explores the fast-moving world of biotech and pharma. I'm your host, Joe Coletti, and today we'll be joined by RBC's biotechnology analyst, Luca Issi, to talk about the rapid surge in innovation and investment in genetic medicine. Now let's get right into it. Luca, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, fired up about this conversation, so looking forward to it.
So before we get into our topic, I do want you to tell us a little bit more about your own personal background. Let our listeners in on that a little bit. And then, and I know you'll love to do this, tell us a little bit more about why you find the genetic medicine space so exciting.
Yeah, I'm originally from Italy, from beautiful Italy, born and raised there. I'm a PhD scientist by training. I have, at this point, close to 10 years of experience both on the buy side and the sell side. And again, we cover here at RBC the genetic medicine space more broadly. We're very, very excited about that space. I feel that for the very first time in history, we not only understand the genetic underpinnings of disease, but we actually have tools that allow us to tackle them. If you reflect on diseases like hemophilia or sickle cell disease, for a very, very long period of time, all we knew about those diseases were the genetics behind it, but there was not a whole lot that we could do about it. Versus now we do have tools that actually allow us to fix some of those genetics, right? So if you think about turning off a bad gene, welcome to siRNA or antisense oligonucleotide. It allows you to turn off the expression of those genes, right? Or maybe you want to do the opposite. You want to turn on a gene. Well, you should check out what mRNA can do or gene therapy can do, which again can allow the expression of genes that are important for the pathophysiology of different patients. Or maybe you want to fix a gene. I mean, this is the latest and greatest. Gene editing is the answer. It's the technology that actually allow you to fix genes. We actually estimate 27 drugs approved within the genetic medicine space. And we think that this could be just the tip of the iceberg. When we look at the number of monogenic diseases out there are 6,000 monogenic diseases, meaning caused by one gene and only one gene. We continue to believe that genetic medicine is the next wave of innovation in biotech, and we believe that will continue to unlock value for both patients and shareholders.
It's just amazing to hear you talk about it from a top line, the potential in this space. And I think that, one of the things that you obviously cited is, I think, something that people have heard much more about since COVID, mRNA. So maybe we just double click a little bit down into mRNA for a second. So what has been the impact of this technology on the vaccine industry?
Yeah, no, great question, Joe. Maybe I'll take it on, starting with the vaccine side first and then go to the technology. I mean, look, we're big believers in vaccines, right? So it's actually estimated that except for safe water, there's no other modality that has ever had a larger impact in mortality in humans in history. So vaccines do prevent 4 million deaths every year. They prevent 322 million illnesses every year. And if you think about it, there's entire diseases that have been eradicated because of vaccine, right? If you think about diphtheria or smallpox, those have been eradicated because of vaccines. And, mRNA is really transforming this industry. If you think about what mRNA can do, you're essentially using humans to produce the immunogenic protein instead of very, very large bioreactor. And the implications here is that you can produce these vaccines in a lot cheaper, faster, and more versatile way. Moderna went from 100,000 doses produced in 2019 to actually 800 million doses produced in 2021. This would have never been possible with traditional vaccine manufacturing. And obviously, pharma is now all over this technology. Merck, Pfizer, Roche, Eli Lilly, GSK investing big dollars behind mRNA. I think it's great news that this technology is now both clinically, as a Roche, Eli Lilly, GSK dated, If you think about what the clinical data for the COVID vaccine showed, efficacy obviously in the mid-90s, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and the rest is history. Like the vaccine has prevented 18.5 million hospitalizations, 13.5 million prevented in the United States, and $1.15 trillion saved in the United States alone. So again, we're excited about vaccines. mRNA is transforming this industry, and we believe that it's poised to continue to create value.
So many of us have seen the power of mRNA in real life now. Is there a role for mRNA beyond the COVID vaccines?
We have seen some very, very promising data in melanoma, where, again, I don't want to oversell that data. It's just 157 patients, so it's still relatively small. However, it has been shown that the patients randomized to the standard of care versus the standard of care plus the vaccine, the patients that did receive the vaccine, either live longer or had their cancer come back later. So again, cautious, don't want to oversell the data, but it's very, very promising. The data is going to be presented in an upcoming medical meeting at AACR, and this could be the epitome of personalized medicine. So just for context, this is a vaccine where you take the tumor biopsy from a patient and you take a healthy tissue as well, and then you're essentially looking at what are the differences in the molecular biology between the two, the healthy tissue and the tumor biopsy, and you come up with a cocktail of different mRNAs that should stimulate your immune system and have the ability of your immune system to go after cancer. So again, every single patient will get a different cocktail of mRNA. So again, this is really the epitome of personalized medicine. I think there is reasons to believe that this technology would not only be limited to infectious disease, but will create value also for other indications, including cancer potentially.
So we haven't heard the last of mRNA, is what I'm hearing you say, which I think is a good thing. So, maybe staying in the RNA family slightly for a second, pivoting a little bit to siRNA. It looks like it's been a roller coaster ride for investors, with multiple setbacks along the way. Where are we, in your view, in the innovation cycle, and where is it headed next?
Certainly, siRNA has been a little bit of a roller coaster ride for investors. So certainly has not been a straight line. And if you recall, again, Craig Mallender fired won the Nobel Prize in 2006, and there was some really initial enthusiasm with a lot of pharma and VC pouring money in this field. And it was exciting for a while, and then it became no longer exciting because, unfortunately, there has been some issues. Alnylam had a mortality imbalance for revusiran. There was some early toxicity in monkey from a different company. Some of the early data in cancer actually end up not playing out immediately. So most investors lost hope. So most investors left the space. If you look at where the field was in the mid-2010, this was a $5 billion cumulative market cap across all the entire field of siRNA. And again, most investors left, but few decided to stay. And the one that stayed actually got rewarded in a pretty impressive way because, again, the science made progress. There was this, the main issue here was to deliver this technology to the right tissue. There was this innovations called GalNAc that allows people to deliver the siRNA directly to the liver in a pretty safe manner, and the rest is history. There's now multiple drugs that are approved for siRNA. If you look at the cumulative value for that field, it's a $50 billion value if you combine market cap as well as some of the M&A that we have seen in that space. So innovation takes time. It's never a straight line. Science is always humbling. It's always taking longer than you would hope for. But again, disruptive technology can ultimately succeed, and siRNA, I think, is a great example of that. And I think the last part of your question, where's this technology going next? I mean, I kind of think about it at two levels. So number one is the indication. So far, siRNA has been used primarily for very kind of rare or ultra rare diseases like primary hyperoxaluria or acute hepatic porphyria or some of the others. However, it is a technology that might get approved in the foreseeable future for much larger indications. A company like Alnylam is working on TTR cardiomyopathy, which are much larger indications. And so I think that's where the field is going, from rare to more prevalent indications, as well as new tissues. So as of today, the technology is primarily used to turn off genes in the liver. However, we have seen innovations on tissues beyond liver. So again, we've seen some early data in the CNS as well as some early data in muscles and other tissues. So again, exciting technology, And I think going to both larger indications as well as new tissues is where this technology is going from now on.
Yeah, I really take to heart your innovation takes time, and I know you've said it to me before that innovation is not linear, which I think is a really important point, particularly in this sector. And I think that it's a great transition to another topic that we have to talk about, which is gene editing. So what about gene editing? It's something that I think a lot of people will read about in the news, but there's a lot more to it. And what's the opportunity here, not just for patients, but also investors?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, look, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuelle Charpentier won the Nobel Prize in 2020, the very first female duo to ever win the Nobel Prize. So again, obviously very, very exciting technology there. This is essentially a technology that allows you to essentially precisely edit individual genes, actually using an old bacterial immune system. So again, there's a lot of indications that this technology is applicable to. We already have seen some great proof of concept from a few companies, including CRISPR and including Intellia. We may get the very first CRISPR-Cas9 therapy approved in the foreseeable future. Again, CRISPR is supposed to file their sickle cell disease program soon. So again, very, very exciting technology. And I think for gene editing, it adds a wrinkle, which is this is going to be one and done, right? So you're essentially permanently edited gene and you're fixing the disease. And so this is going to be quite disruptive for the broader field. And again, it will take time. And we know from siRNA that, this technology did not become reality for patients overnight. But yeah, we're quite exciting. And then obviously investors need to balance the excitement around the technology with some of the risks, which we may want to talk about it. But again, overall, we continue to be big believers in this technology.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, is talking about some of these risks. I mean, obviously, gene editing is clearly an exciting technology. I think there's consensus on that. But when you're talking about permanently editing the DNA of human beings and not being able to go back after that, can you talk and expand maybe a little bit on what some of those risks are?
Yeah, great question. Again, we need to monitor these patients very, very carefully, and we need to stay vigilant and make sure that these patients don't have any unintended consequences. And really, when you think about the risks, it's two levels. So level one is what's called off-target editing. So essentially, you're trying to edit gene A. However, in the process, you're also editing gene B, and that gene B has some unintended consequences. And so we have to be careful. We have to monitor these patients. We have to do whatever is in our power to de-risk potential safety concern. However, so far, so good. We've seen data. It looks like the off-target editing occurs at higher doses versus the doses that are therapeutically relevant. So it looks like you can actually thread the needle here between safety and efficacy. And again, you have to be cautious. It's still early days, but we're quite reassured from that. So again, the other very, very important considerations here, Joe, as you know, is the potential risk of transgenerational risk. So essentially, you're permanently editing the genome of human beings. And so the key question is is it possible that permanent edit actually gets passed over to the offspring? And so this is obviously something that we have to monitor really, really carefully. It is a potential risk. However, so far so good. In animal models, we have not seen this being passed along to the next generations. And I would also say we now have technologies that allow us to deliver the therapy specifically to specific tissues. So the risk should be fairly limited. Again, I'm reflecting back on the way, for example, Intellia is delivering their gene editing approach to using lipid nanoparticles. Those lipid nanoparticles are designed to go specifically in the liver. So those, the likelihood that other tissues, including sperm or eggs, are being edited is fairly low. Again, something that we have to be very careful about. Is something that needs to be monitored over time. We do need longitudinal data. So far, it does not seem to be a big concern.
No, I think really important points. And I mean, we've covered mRNA, we've covered siRNA, we've talked a little about gene editing. The question that probably stands out in people's minds, I'd love to get your perspective. What will really distinguish the winners versus the losers in the genetic medicine field?
Yeah, I mean, that's a quintessential question here, I guess. But, look, I think there are two components. The way I think about it is, one is the technology itself. And we actually spent a lot of time today to talk about these technologies. So obviously, you need to have a disruptive technology that can make impact for patients. And again, the one that we talked about today, again, we're pretty excited. Obviously, we're biased because we're putting our career behind us, but we think that those technology will make an impact for patients. However, you also have to reflect on just old school execution. Really comes down to these management teams being able to execute, going after the right indication. So again, indications prioritizations is very, very important. I think it's important that with this more innovative technology, we first go after indications with large unmet medical need, where you can actually justify taking the risk given the severity of the disease, and maybe the diseases for which we do have alternatives maybe will come a little bit later in the game. And I would say also, especially in this environment, navigating a tough financial environment, it's something that'll be very important. Obviously, biotech is very capital intensive, and so I think being it's about the technology for sure, and having a technology disruptive is critical. But like old school execution and strategy will matter too, and I think that those two components are going to ultimately be the two factors that distinguish the winners versus losers in this field.
All right. Is there anything else we need to cover, Luca?
I just want to thank you for the time, Joe. I think this was a fantastic conversation. Again, looking forward to have more of those. Again, for anyone who wants to reach out, you know where to find me, and we appreciate the time.
And we're going to need to have you back because there's so much going on in the space and there's so much potential in the space. And we know that investors and a lot of folks in our audience value this perspective. So please do come back.
We appreciate you having me on the show, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you for listening to Pathfinders in Biopharma, brought to you by RBC Capital Markets. This episode was recorded on March 24th, 2023. If you'd like to learn more or continue the conversation, please contact us directly or visit rbccm.com/biopharma. If you're enjoying Pathfinders in Biopharma, don't miss an episode. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. See you next time.
This content is based on information available at the time it was recorded and is for informational purposes only. It is not an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation, and no recommendations are implied. It is outside the scope of this communication to consider whether it is suitable for you and your financial objectives.